Welcome to Into the Night. I'm Nari, your guide on today's excursion down a twisted path. Be careful not to get lost. Be it dark or light, it's easy to lose your way. Are you ready? Then let's begin. The Homecoming. Black-eyed Susans mingled with daisies in the field, bobbing to and fro in the late morning air. The warm breeze flowed from the south, bringing muggy air and building clouds on the horizon. Spring slipped gently into summer, making Evelyn McMinn's return to her childhood home even sweeter. If I didn't know any better, I'd swear nothing has changed. A slight wince crossed her face. I know better than that, though. So much has changed. The last time she walked this field felt like a different lifetime. Closing her eyes, Evelyn could hear her mother's sweet soprano singing as she busied herself around their home. Her father's laughter echoed through her memories, and she swore she could hear her brothers and sisters giggling as they chased each other during an endless game of tag. Evelyn knew these were only memories, though. Her siblings left this place long ago to pursue their own lives. She recalled her mother reminding her of this long ago. You can't stay here forever, Evie. You were born to make your own path in the world. You and your brothers and sisters will always love each other, but you must go your own ways. Scatter to the winds like the dandelion seeds blowing through the field. Her mother squinted as she watched the dandelions take flight. It's magical, isn't it, Mama? Yes, it is. We will miss you when you go, but your father and I could never live with ourselves if we didn't let you find the life you were destined to live. Her mother wrapped her daughter in her arms and kissed her. Mama, what if I can't find my way? What if I get lost? You won't, Evie. You won't get lost. You have a good head on your shoulders. So do your brothers and sisters. We know you will be just fine. Now here she was, back in the same place she was born. She'd never been far away, or at least not as far as some of her brothers and sisters had traveled, but she hadn't been home. Now she was. And for the first time in ages, she felt she belonged. The changes that took place in her absence were hard to adjust to. Both of her parents were gone, lost in an unexpected flood that ravaged the area. Their home, once located on a sleepy little brook that was no more than a trickle, was swept away by a torrent of water that devastated the community. Neighbors were lost as well, and it was difficult to walk along the once familiar landscape that was now forever altered by the storm. None of the bodies were recovered, further adding to the despair of those who survived. All the bereaved could do was stand on the edge of the once placid creek bank and cry silent tears of farewell. The lack of closure a funeral provided made the emptiness so much more profound. Evelyn was determined, however, to find out the cause of the disaster. The sun beating down on the mourners made it even more difficult to comprehend that a sudden flood had just destroyed their lives forever. Surely someone is to blame for what happened. Shouldn't a warning have been sounded? Shouldn't the residents have been given time to escape? I just can't accept that this was an act of God. I don't believe God operates that way. While she was an artist, a weaver by trade, Evelyn was born with an inquisitive nature. She knew how to investigate, and she had the grit not to accept that there were no answers to her many questions. Yes, she grieved, but she was angry. The two emotions combined made her an unstoppable force. She would get to the bottom of this tragedy, and she wanted the world to know what happened to her community. I never should have left. I told Mama I wanted to stay, but she wanted me to explore. She knew my curiosity caused me to want to see other places, but my heart was always here. If I'd stayed, could I have saved them? These thoughts weighed heavily on her. At times, she beat herself up for not being with her family. Why did she survive when others didn't? The guilt overwhelmed her, and sometimes she felt as though she couldn't breathe. Sometimes, though, I think I was spared for a reason. who would go to the lengths I'm willing to go to solve what happened? Who would give Mama and Daddy and all of their neighbors justice if I wasn't here? Certainly not my siblings. Some of them are so self-absorbed with themselves and their own families that I'm not sure they've even stopped to pay their respect to our parents. The anger boiled in her veins. She rubbed her hands against her temples to try to keep a headache at bay that came from the emotional overload and lack of sleep that she'd dealt with since the horrible events of the past week. I can't let a headache slow me down. Now that the memorial service is over, I have to get busy. I must track down the cause of the flood, and I can't afford to waste time in bed with a headache. She slowed her breathing, closed her eyes, and tried to calm herself. Slowly the headache abated. When she felt her heart rate lessen, she opened her eyes and looked out over the field of blowing grasses in their pasture. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully, and a meadowlark flew overhead. If someone didn't know better, they'd think nothing bad could ever happen here. That nothing bad ever happened here. I wonder if the cows and the meadowlark are aware of the tragedy that took place, or if their lives continued on while the lives of so many others didn't. She realized it was folly to think that a cow or bird would be so thoughtful or aware, but her pain caused her to resent anyone and anything that didn't acknowledge her loss. How dare any living creature live a life of blissful ignorance to her parents' deaths? How did the sun even continue to rise or the stars come out at night when Evelyn's world was so completely shattered? Exhausted from it all, Evelyn fell asleep on a soft bed of clover in what had once been her family's backyard, and she didn't awaken until early morning light peeked over the distant hills. Bleary-eyed and rested, she knew today was when she would begin her search for answers. The only way to know what caused the flood is to find its source. Where did the catastrophic failure happen? Had a dam broke? Had someone caused the torrent on purpose? I hate to think that someone would willfully cause harm, but evil exists in the world. Gathering her pack, her journey began. It may not be a direct route, but my best bet is to follow the devastation of the flood upstream. Eventually, I'll come to its source. She met some neighbors as she started out. Some gave her words of encouragement. Others thought she was foolhardy for believing that she, a mere girl barely old enough to make her way in the world, was able to take on the task. The naysayers are just simply too afraid to do it themselves. Their doubt only makes me angrier, and my anger fuels my determination to find the truth. Treacherous days passed as Evelyn followed the winding path of the ravaged creek bed. The sun beat down upon her in the day, and she slept vulnerable to wild beasts during the night. Her feet hurt, her stomach growled, and she nearly gave up hope a few times. Maybe this is too great of an undertaking for a young girl. I'm not strong or fearsome. What if I find something I can't overcome at the end of this journey? What if I never even complete this journey? Doubt only stabbed at her in her weakest moments. Quickly, she redoubled her determination to carry on. She must solve the mystery of what happened. Sleep and a light meal generally gave her a fresh perspective and allowed her to continue her hike. After days of torturous travel, she came upon a frightful sight. Towering ahead of her at the end of the flood-ravaged landscape stood a monstrous structure. Cold, dead, and menacing, the contraption made Evelyn wince in distress. She knew what she had to do. Perhaps if she climbed to the top of the disturbing structure, she would gain the perspective she needed to find the answers she so desperately sought. The going was tough. With few handholds to grip, she fell a few times before gaining her momentum and confidence. Slowly, she ascended the tower. A strange circular knob sat at the top of this unusual feature, and as her heart filled with dread, she knew it somehow held the key to what happened to her family. Finally, she reached the top. She shaded her eyes with her hand and looked out over the terrain. Yes, this is where the flood began. Suddenly, her blood ran cold. A horrifying sound, sing-song in nature, grew louder and louder. A terrifying giant approached, carrying a large bucket. Evelyn shrank against the cold metal structure as the shadow of the beast loomed above her. The gruesome words, sung as though they were a happy thought, etched into Evelyn's mind. They were words she'd never forget for as long as she lived. And upon returning to the village after she barely escaped with her life, she taught her neighbors the song to keep them safe from the heartless beast that operated the destructive metal tower in the distance. "These are the words, but I warn you, use them with care," she told her friends as they stood near her, entranced by her tale. "These murders were premeditated, and this is proof. I fear the beast plans to do it again." Horrified, they listened.
The itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. Then the itsy bitsy spider went up the spout again.
Embracing her neighbors with all 8 of her limbs, Evelyn wept. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Into the Night Anthology podcast. Written by Caroline Giamanco, narrated by Nari. Theme music by Nico Rodriguez. All other original music, sound design, and editing by Omen Hawk Studios. You can find our links in the show notes. Into the Night is on your favorite podcatcher, so make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review to help other excursionists to join us. I'll see you next time. And remember, whether in the shadows or in the daylight, all twisted paths lead you into the night. Into the Night Anthology is a Creative Typo Entertainment production.
From the indie podcast creators that brought you Microphones and Monsters, A Fool's Quest, Ethereal Embrace, and other hit podcasts, comes a new actual play podcast, Dread Tech Incorporated. Set in the futuristic cyberpunk setting of Dark City, our 3 DDA special agents, Nitz with his drone blip, Sylvia Rivera, the shape-shifting social media icon, and Zaus, the Zoog heavy gunner, take on the evil corporation Yogsonic Dynamics in an attempt to bring the heinous actions of the corporation into the public spotlight. But will our heroes be prepared for the unworldly supernatural horror that lurks below the corporation's front? Follow Dread Tech Incorporated wherever you get your podcast to find out.